Female DEA agents vanished on duty 8 years later. Miners find this in a cave. The scorching desert wind whistled across the barren landscape, carrying with it the whispers of a mystery that had haunted the small town of Los Lunas for years. It was a place too isolated, too quiet, like the quiet before a storm. The once bustling border town now stood eerily still, its dusty streets and faded buildings a mere skeleton of what it had been. And somewhere in the hidden recesses of the surrounding mountains and desolate highways, something or someone was missing. The night had fallen quickly, draping the world in an unsettling silence. There, far away from the nearest sign of civilization, a lone figure was disappearing into the shadows, leaving nothing behind but a set of tire tracks. The local police had long given up on cases like these cases, where the truth was just out of reach, buried beneath layers of corruption, lies, and blood. But this case was different. The missing woman was no stranger to danger. Elena Rivera, a federal agent in her late 20s, had made a name for herself investigating the darkest corners of the United States-Mexico border. She had infiltrated cartel networks, uncovered human trafficking rings, and exposed corrupt officials. But she wasn't prepared for what she would face that night, what she would become. Her last known contact had been a text message to her brother Marcus Rivera, an ex-military investigator with a quiet but determined nature. The message was cryptic, brief, and urgent. "I'm close. They know. They'll come for me soon." That was the last anyone had heard from Elena. Elena had vanished without a trace, and it wasn't long before Marcus realized that his sister's disappearance wasn't part of the usual dangers of her line of work. It wasn't just another missing person case. It wasn't a failed operation or an accident in the field. This was something far more sinister. Los Lunas, a small border town on the edge of the vast Sonoran desert, was a place that lived in the shadow of the mountains and the violence that accompanied them. It was an area where families lived in constant fear, knowing that cartels and human traffickers ran operations right under their noses. Law enforcement often turned a blind eye, corrupt officials worked with the criminals, and many people disappeared never to be seen again. Elena had come to Los Lunas to investigate a string of abductions tied to a larger network stretching from Mexico into the United States. What had started as a routine investigation had taken a deadly turn. A few weeks ago, she'd sent Marcus a short message, the last one he would ever receive. "I'm getting too close. I think they know I'm here." At first, Marcus hadn't thought much of it. She had faced danger before, but the weeks that followed with no updates and no word from her made his blood run cold. The authorities had written her off as another casualty of the job, but Marcus knew better. His sister was tougher than most agents. She wouldn't just disappear, especially not without leaving something behind. The reality of it began to hit him hard when he found Elena's phone abandoned on the outskirts of town, hidden beneath a pile of brush. There were no fingerprints on it, no signs of struggle. It was as if she had left it there willingly. But why? What had she discovered that was worth risking her life, her safety? The search was supposed to have been conducted by federal agents, but Marcus knew how those investigations went. Disorganized, half-hearted, and often covered up by people who didn't want the truth to be found. He couldn't trust anyone. If he was going to find his sister, it would be up to him. The morning after the discovery of Elena's phone, Marcus packed his things and set out for Los Lunas. He didn't know what to expect, but he knew one thing for certain. This was not just a simple missing person case. The small town was a hotbed for criminal activity. Drug cartels, human trafficking, and organized crime were the norm here. But there was more to the story, something deeper, something more dangerous. The drive was long and treacherous. The road from Phoenix to Los Lunas was dusty and cracked, snaking through the desert landscape. As he approached the town, the heat seemed to press against him, suffocating him with the weight of its secrets. The air was dry, and the smell of diesel mixed with the faint scent of decay. He reached the outskirts of the town by midday, but the sun had already begun to set, casting long shadows over the landscape. Marcus parked his truck near the edge of the town, where the road gave way to dirt tracks leading into the vast desert. From here, the mountains loomed in the distance, silent, ominous, and watching. Somewhere within those peaks, Elena's trail had gone cold. Somewhere in those mountains she had vanished. The first thing Marcus noticed as he entered the town was the silence. It was the kind of quiet that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. The streets were empty. No children playing, no shops open. The town looked deserted, abandoned by the very life it once had. Yet it was far from empty. The town's shadows were alive, teeming with the kind of criminal activity that ensured its residents stayed silent. Those who lived here had learned to keep their heads down, to pretend nothing was wrong, to avoid drawing attention. He made his way to the local sheriff's office, hoping for answers, but his hopes were dashed as soon as he stepped inside. Sheriff Alvarez, a thin, aging man with deep lines etched into his face, looked up from his desk with a practiced indifference. "We don't get many visitors around here," he said, his voice gruff. "What can I help you with?" Marcus wasted no time. "I'm looking for Elena Rivera, federal agent. She's been missing for weeks." Sheriff Alvarez's eyes narrowed. "I know the name. She came through here about a month ago. Haven't heard anything since. You're wasting your time." Marcus could see the hesitation in the sheriff's eyes, the way he averted his gaze, but he didn't press him. There were more questions to ask, more people to talk to. Alvarez wasn't going to be helpful. No one was. As Marcus left the sheriff's office, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. The streets felt different now, colder, more hostile. The town was too quiet, too controlled. He went to the local diner, a small, rundown establishment with peeling paint and flickering neon lights. Inside, a few patrons sat in silence, nursing their drinks. He took a seat at the counter, hoping to gather some information. The waitress, a young woman with dark circles under her eyes, came over. "What can I get you?" she asked, her voice soft, almost too quiet. "Have you seen anything strange around here lately?" "Anything unusual?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his tone casual. She hesitated, then leaned in closer. "You don't want to be asking questions like that around here, mister. People disappear for asking the wrong questions." It wasn't much, but it was enough. Something was off. Something was buried in the quiet of this place, something dangerous. That night, as Marcus sat in his truck on the outskirts of town, staring out at the dark outline of the mountains, he felt the weight of the mystery closing in around him. Elena had come here to investigate something that no one else was willing to touch. She had uncovered something so dangerous that it had cost her everything. He didn't know where her trail would lead him, but he knew one thing for certain. Elena had been close to uncovering the truth about the darkness lurking in the borderlands, and now Marcus was about to find out just how far the darkness reached. The morning air in Los Lunas was still heavy with the dust of the desert clinging to Marcus's skin as he stepped out of his truck. The town had not changed since he first arrived, the empty streets, the dilapidated buildings, the quiet tension that weighed on every person he passed. The unease that had settled in his chest seemed to grow heavier with each passing hour. Something was wrong here, something that went beyond Elena's disappearance. As he stood at the edge of the town, staring at the distant mountains, Marcus knew he had only one choice: he needed to dive deeper. His sister had come here with a purpose to expose a dark truth, and whatever she had uncovered, it was now his responsibility to finish what she had started. He had no illusions about what he might find. Elena had always been a fighter, tough and determined, but she had underestimated the forces at work here, forces that had been operating in the shadows for years. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the task ahead of him. He couldn't waste any more time. He needed answers, and to get those answers he needed to start with the people who might have known Elena best in this town, those who could help him piece together the last moments of her investigation. Marcus spent the following day digging into the heart of Los Lunas. He visited every lead he could find: the shady pawn shops, the abandoned warehouses, the few remaining residents who were willing to talk. Most were tight-lipped, unwilling to trust an outsider, especially one who came asking questions about missing people. But Marcus wasn't easily deterred. His time in the military had taught him patience, how to read people and their unspoken fears. At the local bar, an old man named Jorge, who looked like he had been drinking the same whiskey for decades, finally gave Marcus a scrap of information. "You're asking about La Sombra." Jorge's slurred eyes heavy with suspicion. "That's what they call him, the Shadow. You won't get far if you're looking for him, my friend. No one does." "The Shadow," Marcus repeated, trying to mask his interest. "Who is he?" Jorge eyed him for a long moment, his face creasing into a grimace. "You think you can just walk in here, dig around, and get the truth? You don't know this place, do you? The Shadow runs everything here. Cartels, traffickers, even the damn cops. He's untouchable." Marcus's instincts flared. He'd heard rumors of a powerful cartel figure who controlled operations on both sides of the border, a figure so elusive that no one could ever confirm his true identity. La Sombra, the Shadow. He'd never thought he'd hear the name whispered here in this quiet town. But it seemed Elena had been on the trail of something bigger than a few isolated kidnappings. The more Marcus probed, the more he realized that Los Lunas was not merely a small, forgotten town. It was a hub of illegal activity, a place where the law was powerless, where the cartel's influence seeped into every crack and crevice of life. From human trafficking to weapons smuggling to money laundering, La Sombra controlled it all, and his grip extended beyond the town, stretching into Mexico and deep into the heart of the United States. As Marcus left the bar, he felt a cold certainty settle over him. Elena had been up against more than just a few corrupt officials. She had been hunting down a criminal empire, a network so vast and insidious that it had left no room for mercy. After days of fruitless inquiries and vague warnings, Marcus caught a break. A man who claimed to have been a former associate of the cartel's operations gave him a cryptic clue about a house on the outskirts of town. "That place," he said, "it's where people disappear, where they're never heard from again. Don't go there unless you want to join them." Marcus didn't hesitate. If this house held the answers he sought, then he had no choice but to find it. The man hadn't said much more, and Marcus wasn't sure whether the warning was out of fear or something else. But it was clear that something important had happened there, something that might lead him to Elena. The house was a decaying shell on the edge of the desert, hidden behind a row of dying trees. Its windows were boarded up, the paint peeling from the walls, as though the house itself was struggling to hold on to life. The place had the look of abandonment, yet something about it felt too deliberate, too protected. Marcus parked his truck a safe distance away and approached on foot. The dry desert air cut through his clothes as he crossed the empty lot. Every step he took seemed to echo louder than the last, a reminder that he wasn't alone here. He found the back door unlocked, as if someone had expected him, or at least didn't mind visitors. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the stale scent of mildew and rotting wood hanging in the air. It was eerily quiet, and for a moment Marcus almost expected to hear someone breathing in the shadows. As he moved through the house, it became clear that it wasn't just abandoned. There were signs that someone had lived here recently: scattered papers, empty cans, discarded clothing. But it wasn't the mess that caught Marcus's attention. It was the photographs. They were pinned to the wall in the dimly lit living room. Polaroids of women, men, and children. Their eyes were wide with fear, their bodies marked with signs of abuse. Some of the faces were unfamiliar to Marcus, but others he recognized. Elena had been here. There was no doubt about it. One photograph in particular caught his eye. It was a picture of a woman, tired, beaten, but her face was unmistakable. It was a younger version of Elena, standing among the captives in what appeared to be a makeshift holding cell. Her expression was one of pure determination, the same look Marcus had seen on her face countless times. She had been here in this house, and somehow she had left this evidence behind. But why? What had she hoped to accomplish by leaving a trail of photographs? It was as if she had known that no matter what happened, someone he would come looking for her. The discovery left Marcus with more questions than answers. He gathered the photos and left the house, but as he did, he felt the familiar weight of eyes on his back. Someone was watching him just as they had watched Elena, and whatever Elena had started, whatever truth she had uncovered, he was now on the same path no matter how dangerous it might be. As he made his way back to his truck, Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from an unknown number. "You shouldn't be here." Marcus froze for a moment, staring at the message. His fingers hovered over the screen, his mind racing. The message wasn't from anyone he knew, but it was clear that whoever sent it had been watching him. "Get out of town while you still can." There was no signature, no indication of who had sent it, but Marcus understood the message loud and clear. Someone, the Shadow, or one of his people, was aware of his presence, and if he didn't leave soon, the consequences would be severe. But Marcus wasn't leaving. Not yet. If Elena had left these photographs as a breadcrumb trail, he would follow it. He owed her that much. That night, Marcus returned to his room at the local motel, his mind racing. The photographs had given him a glimpse into the darkness that Elena had been uncovering. But it was clear now that he was in over his head. The deeper he dug, the more he realized that there was no escaping the monster that had already begun to close in on him. His phone buzzed again. Another message. "You've been warned." Marcus stared at the screen. This was no longer just about his sister. It was about survival, about getting the truth out before it swallowed him whole, and he wouldn't stop until he had answers. He wasn't sure how much longer he had before the walls closed in. But he knew one thing for certain: if he was going to make it out of this alive, he had to finish what Elena had started. He had to uncover the truth before it was buried forever. The night passed with little rest for Marcus. The weight of what he had uncovered at the abandoned house gnawed at him, his thoughts spinning with questions he couldn't yet answer. Elena's trail was growing colder, but the pieces of the puzzle were beginning to form. He just had to stay one step ahead of the people who didn't want him to uncover the truth. The next morning, Marcus decided to take the photos he found to the local sheriff. He needed to understand more about the history of the house, and whether anyone had ever been reported missing in the area. He knew it was a long shot. Sheriff Ramos had a reputation for being slow to act on anything that didn't directly involve his town's narrow interests, but he had to try. Sheriff Ramos was sitting behind a cluttered desk when Marcus entered the small, dimly lit office. The sheriff, an older man with a graying mustache, looked up from a stack of paperwork and gave Marcus a cursory glance before pushing his chair back and standing. "What do you want, stranger?" Ramos's voice was raspy, as if the weight of the town had settled into his throat. "I need information," Marcus said, placing the photographs on the desk between them. "These are of people who were either trafficked or," he paused, unwilling to say the word dead out loud just yet, "disappeared. I need to know who they are, and if you have any missing persons reports connected to this house." Ramos's expression didn't change as he picked up the photos. His eyes flicked over them quickly, then he set them down, his fingers tapping nervously on the desk. "Look, kid." Ramos sighed, sitting back down. "You don't want to dig too deep into that. This town isn't what you think it is. Those people, they're gone all right. Some disappeared long before you got here. You think you're going to help them? The police don't stand a chance against what you're dealing with." Marcus stared at him, frustration creeping in. "I don't care about your warnings. I'm looking for my sister. She's the one who was here investigating. And if these people were trafficked, I want to know who was behind it." Ramos's hand paused mid-tap, his expression shifting. "Elena," he muttered under his breath, as if trying to remember her name. "You sure you're her brother?" "I am." "What do you know about her?" For a long moment Ramos didn't speak. His eyes darted to the door and then to the photos before he leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a low whisper. "I heard rumors, but I didn't want to believe them. Elena was involved in something big, way bigger than anyone around here realizes. She was asking about La Sombra." The name hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. La Sombra, the Shadow. "You're saying she was tracking La Sombra?" Marcus's voice was barely audible. Ramos nodded slowly, his eyes filled with something that could almost be mistaken for fear. She was close to something. I don't know what, but it was dangerous. The kind of dangerous that gets you buried out in the desert never to be found again. That's why I didn't help her. I don't want to end up like the others. Marcus clenched his fists. You should have helped her. Now I'm here, and I'm going to find out the truth. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsettled by the intensity in Marcus's voice. You don't get it, kid. There's no truth here, no justice. The town, the law, everything's under the shadow of La Sombra. If you're serious about this, you need to leave. This place will swallow you whole. But Marcus wasn't listening anymore. The warning was clear enough, but his resolve had already hardened. Elena had been closer than he realized. If she had been tracking La Sombra, then she had uncovered something that no one else had dared to touch. The sheriff's warning faded in the back of his mind. Marcus had no intention of backing down. As Marcus left the sheriff's office, his thoughts were consumed with one thing: La Sombra. Everything pointed to him. The cartel's operations, the human trafficking, the way everything connected back to this elusive figure in the shadows. The deeper he went, the more dangerous the web became. But the more Marcus thought about it, the more he realized that the only way to get the full picture, to understand who La Sombra truly was, and what had happened to Elena, was to cross the border into Mexico. That was where La Sombra's operations were likely rooted, where he could pull the strings from the shadows and keep his identity hidden from prying eyes. If Elena had gotten this far in her investigation, there had to be something waiting for him on the other side. As the sun set, Marcus drove south towards the Mexican border, trying to shake the feeling that every mile was bringing him closer to a danger he wasn't fully prepared for. He couldn't back out now, not with Elena's fate still hanging in the balance. The border crossing was uneventful. He passed through with little more than a cursory check from the guards, but as he entered the Mexican side of the desert, a different kind of tension settled over him. The landscape shifted, the towns grew smaller and more desolate, and the air grew heavier. The once familiar feeling of desert heat now seemed oppressive, as though the land itself was hiding its secrets. It didn't take long before Marcus found himself driving down a narrow dirt road, one that wound its way deeper into the heart of the desert. He was searching for any sign, any clue that might lead him to Elena. Her path had crossed through here, and it was time to find out just how far she had gone. As Marcus ventured deeper into Mexico, his thoughts returned to La Sombra. The figure was becoming more than just a name. He was the puppet master, the one who had orchestrated everything from the trafficking to the disappearances. But who was he? Was he a single person, or was it a network of people all working under the same shadowy umbrella? There were more questions than answers, and with every hour that passed, Marcus felt the darkness of the desert closing in around him. He wasn't sure how much longer he could continue down this road. If Elena had truly been on the brink of exposing La Sombra, then Marcus was walking into a storm that would sweep everything he knew into oblivion. But there was no turning back now. He had come too far, and the truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered. The sun was sinking low when Marcus finally reached the small town of Santa Teresa, the last known location of Elena's disappearance. The place felt suspended in time. Dusty streets, faded storefronts, and the quiet hum of cicadas in the background. A few locals eyed him suspiciously as he parked his car near the old church at the town's edge, its towering spires casting long shadows. He had come here with a single purpose: to find the missing pieces of his sister's investigation, to uncover the truth buried in the depths of this forgotten corner of Mexico. Marcus approached the church cautiously. Its weathered walls seemed to whisper of secrets, of things buried so deep that even the earth itself seemed to hold its breath. He had been tipped off by an informant about a hidden file, something that might explain why Elena had disappeared. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the smell of incense clung to the rafters. There was no one in sight, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. His fingers traced the cool stone of the altar as he made his way to a side room, hidden away in the far corner of the church. In that room, he found the file. It was hidden under loose floorboards, just as his sister had mentioned in her last cryptic messages. The papers inside were yellowed with age, but the ink was still legible. They detailed an underground operation that stretched across the border, involving both cartel members and corrupt officials. His sister had been on the verge of exposing something big, something so powerful it could shatter the very foundation of this town. But the deeper Marcus dug into the file, the more questions arose. Elena had written something in the margins of one of the pages. "The shadow watches us all." A cold shiver ran down his spine. La Sombra. The shadow wasn't just a name, it was a force, a figure lurking in the background pulling the strings. Before he could examine the file further, Marcus heard footsteps approaching. He quickly shoved the papers back into their hiding spot and stepped back into the main hall, heart pounding. It was clear now someone knew he was here. A tall man stepped into view, his face half hidden in the dim light. He was dressed in a simple black suit, his expression unreadable. "I'm surprised to see you here," he said, his voice soft, yet chilling. Marcus squared his shoulders, ready to confront whatever this man represented. "I'm here for the truth," he replied, his voice steady, despite the fear bubbling in his chest. The man chuckled darkly, his eyes glinting with menace. "The truth, Mr. Harris, is a dangerous thing to seek. Some things are better left buried." And with those words, Marcus realized just how close he was to uncovering a truth that could get him killed. The man in the black suit took a step forward, the floor creaking under his weight. Marcus's grip tightened on the file he had just hidden, his only leverage, his only hope of unraveling the twisted network that had stolen his sister. He couldn't let this man, whoever he was, stop him now. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," the man said, his tone dripping with cold indifference. "This town, this operation, they go beyond what you can imagine. Elena wasn't just investigating human trafficking, she was uncovering a war fought in shadows." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. A war. He struggled to keep his voice steady, unwilling to show any weakness. The war for control. The man continued, his voice lowering to a deadly whisper. "Control of this region, control of the people. And you, Marcus, are now a part of it. Elena, she wasn't supposed to survive, but she did, and she paid for it." The man's words stung like acid, but they also confirmed Marcus's worst fears. Elena had discovered something so dangerous, so powerful, that the forces involved had gone to great lengths to silence her. And now they were after him too. "Where is she?" Marcus demanded. "Where did you bury her?" The man smirked, but his eyes flashed with something darker. "The question isn't where, it's when. Because Elena isn't the only one to have been buried in this place." Before Marcus could react, the man lunged forward, grabbing him by the collar. His grip was strong, too strong. "You should have stayed out of this, Marcus. You should have walked away when you had the chance." With a sharp motion, he threw Marcus against the stone wall, the impact rattling his teeth. Dazed, Marcus pushed himself up, barely able to steady his footing. His mind raced. What did he mean? When was Elena buried? The man's laugh echoed through the empty church. "You'll find out soon enough, but it won't be the truth you expect." As the man stepped toward him, Marcus made a split-second decision. Adrenaline surged through his veins, pushing him to move. He grabbed a nearby candlestick, using it as a makeshift weapon. Without warning, he swung it at the man's face, catching him off guard. The man staggered back, momentarily disoriented. Marcus took his chance, running for the door. His mind was a blur. Escape was the only thing that mattered now. He had to get out of there, get back to the file, and find the answers he was desperate for. But as he bolted down the darkened hallway, the door slammed shut behind him, and the sound of footsteps echoed in pursuit. He wasn't alone. Panic set in as Marcus glanced around, realizing there was nowhere to hide. The man and his unseen allies were closing in fast. He was trapped, but he couldn't stop now. He couldn't let the people who took Elena win. He took a sharp left turn, heading deeper into the church, praying for an escape route. Just as he thought he had run out of options, he spotted a small window above, barely large enough for him to squeeze through. With all the strength he had left, Marcus made a desperate leap, grabbing the ledge and pulling himself through. The cool night air hit his face like a slap as he landed on the ground outside his legs, nearly giving way beneath him. He stumbled to his feet, heart pounding in his chest. His only thought now was to get as far away from this place as possible. The truth, whatever it was buried deeper than he could have ever imagined, and it was up to him to dig it up.